Okay, this is section 6.5 of MathLinks 8. Today's date is November 5th, 2021, and we're going over some of the questions we had assigned for how to divide fractions. Now the first question says Anna divided 5/6 by a half. So she divided 5/6 by a half, and she said the answer is 5/12. What mistake did she make? So this is kind of a good question in that you really have to understand what the methods are for dividing fractions. Now we learned there are three methods. The first method is you can use a common denominator. The second method is you could use money to think about it in terms of decimals and get an idea of what your answer is from money. And the third method, the one that we all want to use, is multiplying by the reciprocal. But the thing is, when you multiply by the reciprocal, you're supposed to take your first fraction, keep it, change to multiplication, and you're supposed to use the reciprocal of the second fraction. What Anna appeared to have done is followed only half of the rule. She changed it to multiplication, but she did not use the reciprocal of the second fraction, and as a result, she ended up with the incorrect answer of 5/12. Now, if Anna had have kept it as 2 over 1 instead of 1 over 2 multiplied by the reciprocal, her final answer would have been 10 over 6, which is equal to 1 4/6, which in lowest terms would be 1 2/3. So the actual answer should have been 1 2/3. Question 2 says Mike carried out the division of 3/4 divided by 2/3 as follows. So he started with the original question. He used the reciprocal of 3/4 to make it 4 to 3. He changed his division to multiplication, and he used 2/3. Now, what Mike might be confusing this with is the commutative property of mathematics. The order in which you multiply two terms does not affect the product. However, that doesn't apply to this because we're not really using the commutative property as much as we're using the reciprocal. So Mike's mistake is he used the reciprocal of the wrong fraction. He should have used the reciprocal of the second fraction, not the first. So what he should have done was he should have took a 3/4 and multiplied it by 3 over 2, the reciprocal of 2/3, and got 9/8, or as a mixed fraction in lowest terms, 1 1/8. Question 7 says divide using a common denominator. So we're given two questions, 3/5 divided by 9/10, and it says use a common denominator. So we're going to change this to two fractions, just like if we were adding or subtracting, we find a common denominator. The first multiple the 5 and 10 share is 10. So 9/10 stays 9/10, and 6/10 becomes here. So once we've rewritten this, keep in mind that 3/5 and 6 over 10 are the same number. They are equivalent fractions, and they both really represent 0.6 divided by 0.9. So if I think about decimals, both of these questions are the exact same thing as decimals. There's no difference. But there's an algorithm that you can use once you have it as common denominator fractions, is you can divide the numerators, and you can divide the denominators. But in doing so, if your denominator is a common denominator, regardless of what number it is, if it's 10 and 10, 6 and 6, 8 and 8, you'll always end up with 1 as your simplified denominator. And that means that this is really going to be the only thing that stays true, because that 1, anything divided by 1 is just itself. So 6 divided by 9 is really your answer, or as a fraction, we say 6 divided by 9 as a fraction is 6 over 9. Right? So the answer for that is 6/9, or in lowest terms, both are divisible by 3. Your lowest term answer for question A, using common denominators, would be 2/3. Question B says 1 1/2 divided by 5/6. The first thing you need to do when dividing anything or multiplying anything, in my opinion, is change that to an improper fraction. So 3 over 2 divided by 5 over 6 is our first step. Don't work with mixed fractions. Once we have that, our common denominator will be the first multiple they share, which is 6. 3 over 2 as an equivalent fraction over 6 is 9/6. When you divide the numerators and divide the denominators, your denominator is 1, which means your answer is 9 divided by 5, or as a fraction, 9 over 5. Which means your final answer is 1 4/5. And our last one has the division of two mixed fractions. So just like B, I'm going to change both of those mixed fractions into improper. So 3 and 1/3 is 10/3 divided by 11/6. This is the exact same question except improper instead of mixed. My common denominator will be 6. When I divide the numerators and divide the denominators, just like before, my denominator becomes 1, which means my answer is just this, which is 20 over 11, which is 1 and 9/11ths as a mixed fraction. Our second method asks us to divide using multiplication. And really what it should say is divide using multiplication of the reciprocal, right? Reciprocal. Divide using the multiplication of the reciprocal. So with that said, the rule is for division using multiplication is keep your first fraction, change it to multiplication, and use the reciprocal or the flip of the second fraction. Since 3/4 reciprocal is 4/3, we're going to have 5 over 12 multiplied by 4/3. Multiply my numerators, I get 20. Multiply my denominators, I get 36. And in lowest terms, it's 5/9. I think because both are divisible by 4. In our second question, we have two mixed fractions. We're not going to use mixed fractions. We're going to change those right on over to improper. So step 1 is just think of it like this. Step 2 is keep your first fraction, which is 4.5 or 9/2, multiplied by the reciprocal of 1 1/4 or the reciprocal of 5/4, which is 4/5. Multiply your numerators, you get 36. Multiply your denominators, you get 10. Your final answer is 3 6/10 or 3 3/5. And your last question, we have a whole number. Don't forget that all whole numbers are really fractions over 1. So before I even start thinking about this question, that's the first thing I'm going to do is just change that whole number to a fraction over 1. 10 over 1 multiplied by the reciprocal of 2.5. Now, since 2.5 is 5/2, what's its reciprocal? Anybody? What's the reciprocal of 2.5? 2/5, right? It's actually the reciprocal of the improper version. Multiply your numerators, you get 20. Multiply your denominators, you get 5. Your final answer, 10 divided into groups of 2.5 is 4. And that makes sense. If you had 10 whole pizzas and you had to make them into deliveries of 2.5 pizzas per delivery, how many deliveries could you make from 10 pizzas? You could make 4 deliveries if each of them was 2.5 pizzas. Our next question just says divide. How many of you chose to divide using multiplication? How many chose to use common denominators? How many used money? Okay, so we'll just multiply by the reciprocal. So 3/4 multiplied by 5/4, the reciprocal will be 15/16, and that is lowest terms. 5 over 3 divided by 17 over 6 will become 5 over 3 multiplied by its reciprocal, which is 30 over 51. Is that lowest terms? It looks like lowest terms, doesn't it? What's divisible into 30 and 51? 3 is divisible. And remember what we said for divisibility rules. We know 30 is divisible by 3 because it's 10. But 51, we don't know our 3 times tables past 30, probably past 10. But remember, 5 plus 1 is equal to 6. And 6 is a multiple of 3. So our divisibility rule from grade 7 means that I know that it is divisible by 3. I just don't know what the answer is. It actually is 17, right? So the answer is 10 over 17. Now we could have also gotten that answer here if I cross-reduced. What would 6 over 3 cross-reduce to? Close, 2 over 1. If I multiplied my numerators now, what would I get? 10. If I multiply my denominators now, what would I get? 17. Right, we could have saved ourselves a little bit of headache. And our last question, 12 over 1. So we're going to go 12 over 1 multiplied by the reciprocal, which is 4/3. It's 36 over 3, which is equal to 12. Oh, did I make a mistake? Oh, 48. Yes, sorry. Thank you. 48 over 3. Oh, heavens. And if I cross reduce just to see what this is, it should be equal to 16. My bad. Question 10. Do we have to, do we have to do 10? No, okay, we'll skip 10. Question 11. It says in a comedy review, each performer has a quarter-hour slot. How many performances are there in a 2-hour show? So a 2-hour show divided into quarter-hour slots. As an expression, it looks like this. 2 divided into quarters, looks like that. Or 2 over 1 multiplied by the reciprocal. How many quarter-hour slots are there in 2 hours? 8. What's a quarter hour? 15. How many 15 minutes are there in an hour? 4. How many in 2 hours? So we could have used that with just our minute understanding and got 8 as well. But the actual answer is there are 8 performers in a 2-hour show. Question 12 says it takes 2.5 cups of scoops of flour to make 1 cake. How many cakes do 15 scoops? So 15 scoops divided into sizes of 2.5 is how many recipes? 15 over 1 multiplied by the reciprocal of 2.5. Since 2.5 is really, as an improper 5 over 2, its reciprocal is the flip of that, which means you have 30 over 5, which means, therefore, 15 scoops of flour can make 6 cakes using division. 15 scoops divided into sizes of 2.5 maketh 6 scoops. And our last question says 3/4 of a can of apple juice fills 6 glasses. How many glasses will fill a whole can? So 6 glasses divided between the 3/4 of a pitcher. We're going to change this. I don't even actually understand why this works, but we'll just write it anyway. Because if we get the right answer, I can't get my head around why it works. That will become 24 over 3, which is equal to 8. Therefore, a whole can can make 8 glasses of juice.